Hey everyone, welcome back to the Living in Maryland channel. And today we are talking about the 5 current things that you need to be aware of before making your move to the state of Maryland. Now, if you're anything like me, I moved here about 8 years ago from 3,000 miles away on the West Coast. So I was looking for all the information that I could get when I was making my move here. I had never lived here and just wanted to know what I was walking into. So just trying to put together a video for people who may be coming from out of the area and wondering what it looks like to live in Maryland and some things to be aware of. Now, just a quick reminder that I am a licensed realtor here in the great state of Maryland. So if you ever have any questions about buying or selling a home here in the state of Maryland, we absolutely love helping out, having conversations with people about what that looks like and helping people achieve those real estate goals. So however you feel most comfortable reaching out, whether that's by phone, text, or email, days, nights, and weekends, we've got your back when moving here to the great state of Maryland. All right, so number 1 on the list is Maryland in the South? Does that identify with being in the South since it is below the Mason-Dixon line? So here's what my experience with that has been like, is that Maryland overall doesn't necessarily identify with being in the South, doesn't necessarily identify with being in the North. Overall, Marylanders just love Maryland. They love living in Maryland. So there's definitely some people who, will talk about Maryland being in the South, and a lot of people who may talk about it not being in the South. So the cool thing about Maryland is that it really is a melting pot, especially when you're talking about central Maryland. So from that greater Baltimore region on down to the DC region, you've got all different types of people. So you've got Fort Meade within Anne Arundel County, which is Maryland's largest employer. So you got all 4 branches of the military there. You've got a ton of different contracting that is kind of run out of Fort Meade. So, and that's bringing people from all over the country and all over the world. And then all the contracting and government work, even outside of Fort Meade within Maryland, just causes a lot of people and different people to come here to Maryland, which is awesome. So it's so cool to have that experience, to get to meet and get to know so many different kinds of people. And then the other cool thing about Maryland is at the same time, with all that going on, you've got so many people who are lifelong Marylanders here, who love Maryland, born and raised here in the area. And it's really cool. So you still have that DNA of Maryland really holding strong. So a couple of things that I love about Maryland when it comes to overall location, that's what you can expect. All right, number 2 thing on the list is that Maryland and Central Maryland as a whole is not super walkable. So if you're moving here, it's definitely a good idea to have a car. Most areas are very suburban, and you're gonna need a car to get around, and it's just gonna make the most sense. Now, there are a few areas, of course, Baltimore City, you've got parts of Annapolis, downtown Silver Spring, downtown Rockville, downtown Columbia are a few areas off the top of my head that definitely have some walkability to them, which is awesome. But most parts of Central Maryland and Maryland are not going to be super walkable. You're going to want to have a car, and that's just going to make the most sense. So kind of looking into that, depending on where you're coming from. If you're coming from the city, making sure you're prepared for that and just kind of knowing what that looks like depending on what part of Maryland that you are thinking about coming to. All right, number 3 on the list is that if you are into sports, and more specifically sports betting, you are in luck when it comes to living here in Maryland. So in the last 2 years, Maryland voters approved sports betting in the state of Maryland. So now when you are anywhere within Maryland, you can pull up your app, whatever app that you're using, whether it's DraftKings, FanDuel, and place your bets. So I know there's some surrounding states where, and I'm talking to people, it's like you get into Pennsylvania and then all of a sudden it doesn't work. So Maryland does have that approved. It is something that you can do here in Maryland. And it's also kind of funny. So when my brother comes out from California, he always gets mad. He's like, I can't believe California hasn't approved this yet. But when he's here, he can pull up the app because it's tied to GPS. And he can do, whatever he wants with his bets there. So that's something to know. So that is something that's a little more newer to Maryland, more recent here. And that's something that you can expect. So when you go to, a couple of the local casinos, Maryland Live has a FanDuel sports bet, right there. And Maryland Live is kind of on the border of Anne Arundel County and Howard County. So it's a little closer to Baltimore, but in between Baltimore and DC. All right, number 4 is learning and being aware of how to merge onto highways and interstates here in Maryland. So where I come from in Southern California, the way I was always used to this is when you're getting onto a freeway, so you're getting onto 405, 105, whatever, you have a single lane, getting on, and you're just kind of all alone. You're not dealing with cars getting over who are trying to get right off to the exit because they're right on top of each other. So it's just totally separate. But here in Maryland, it's usually the same lane. So as you're kind of getting on to get over. There's going to be people who are needing to get in front of you so that they can get off, and a lot of times they're braking, or sometimes people before they merge, they're not comfortable accelerating, so they kind of stop, and it creates this whole thing. So being aware of that and just kind of knowing how that works can be helpful, because it's definitely it definitely can be a little tricky when you're trying to get on, because everyone's getting on and off at the same place usually on most of our highways. So being aware of that can be very helpful. All right, and then last but not least, number 5 on the list is being aware of ground rent here in Maryland, and more specifically the Baltimore region. So this is going to be something that's almost, I wouldn't say exclusive, but it's primarily in the city of Baltimore and then the county of Baltimore. And it's not everywhere within Baltimore. It's just something that you do want to be aware of, because it does still exist, and it can exist anywhere within Central Maryland. So the easiest way for me to kind of think about this is you don't actually, when you're purchasing a property, you don't actually own the dirt, you only own the structure. So it's definitely something you want to be aware of if you are looking at, row homes, townhomes, single family homes. So this is something that Baltimore was doing, years and years and years ago. It is something where the government stepped in and said, look, we don't want this done anymore. You've got to give people the right to redeem this and get out of it. Now, the more traditional type of ownership is called fee simple. So that's where you own the dirt, you own the structure. That's what you want to see, and I think that's what most buyers expect. So a lot of times buyers don't figure this out until they're already under contract. So it's just helpful to, because it's going to be brought up by the title company. It's going to come up at some point. So it is something that if you can, to just be aware of as you're in the searching process. So as you're looking at places and properties in Baltimore, just being aware of this, making sure you're asking questions so that you can know what you're walking into here, and if the property you're looking at potentially has ground rent. Now, as a realtor, this is something I'm always keeping an eye out for. You can actually pull the deed up on all properties at MD Land Rec. It's a website, public, records within Maryland, where you can pull deeds for all properties, and you can actually see on page 1 of the deed if the property is held in fee simple, or if it's held in leasehold. That means the same thing as ground rent. So that's kind of the terminology that I'm always looking for when I'm listing properties and when I'm representing buyers, to ensure that we know exactly what that looks like. Because there's sometimes, even when you're listing properties, sometimes sellers don't realize that they're in a leasehold or a ground rent position. So it's always something that you want to know about, regardless of the side of the transaction, so you can know whether you need to disclose it or whether you're walking into it as a buyer. So now it's not a huge issue. You can definitely, get it taken care of, but it's just something to be, aware of, and something that's helpful to know. Now, when it comes to redemption of the ground rent, Baltimore and the state of Maryland stepped in and said, look, you've got to allow all property owners to redeem this when it comes to that. So that's something that you can always do if you have ground rent. You're not stuck with that forever. So it is something you can always get rid of. So you're going to take the annual amount of the ground rent. So I'm just going to use $120 per year as an example, which is a common amount. You're going to divide it by 6%, which in this example would be $2,000. And that's how much the redemption would be. So title companies can do this. They do this all the time, where they're redeeming it because it comes up during a home purchase. The sellers just pay for it at settlement, and then they go and they redeem it, and they can flip it into fee simple. So it's something that can be done pretty easily and pretty regularly here in the Maryland, and more specifically Baltimore area. But just wanted people to be aware of exactly what that looks like, and also so you can be on the lookout and have conversations about this, especially if you're looking in the Baltimore region. All right, everyone, that's what I got for you today. I hope it was helpful. If you ever have any questions about real estate or making a move here to Maryland, please feel free to reach out, and we will see you at the next video.